fans complain about, and the reason some of us would like to leave the Big 12 at times, is because of the travel.
It's awful.
Which is what I want to talk about next, is the travel challenges that are faced by West Virginia in the Big 12. And Tony, you and I talked offline about it, but kind of go over what you have found in not only in your research, but even in your own experience traveling to some of these institutions.
So I'll tell you, first of all, so I worked in the athletic department at USC as an undergrad. And one of their very high up people once told me something like, he said, because of how the Pac-12 schools are located with pairs and airports, he said something like a monkey throwing feces could schedule the Pac-12. It'd be the best of the Power 5 conferences as far as scheduling goes and convenience. So, for example, in the Pac-12, typically, now football and men's basketball tend to charter planes, and they can fly anytime they want to anywhere they want. But for all of your other sports, your non-revenue sports, getting the kids to the games so that they're not missing class is really important. And it's massively important at places like Stanford and Washington and UCLA and USC and Berkeley. And like the professors don't want to hear the kids are missing class. Mm-hmm. So at the Pac-12 schools, from any Pac-12 school to any other one, they go in pairs. So they like the two LA schools will go to Oregon, the two Washington schools will go to Arizona, and they'll do a flip-flop. They'll do like a Friday night game and a Sunday afternoon game. And so that you can have class in the morning and leave at lunch and go from any Pac-12 school to any other one and play a Friday night game, take Saturday off, play a Sunday afternoon game, and be home in bed by midnight, which is huge. No other Power 5 conference has that wonderful, beautiful scheduling capability. So, Kuz, when we chatted, I never really thought much about how bad the Big 12 travel was. And I was sort of looking at some of these numbers for something else that somebody asked me to take a look at for the Pac-12 and the Ivy League, where I think Cincinnati is similar to distance to West Virginia as the furthest of the Ivy League schools are apart from each other. And I was on a cycling team in grad school, so we would go to other conference. I went to University of Pennsylvania, so we would go to other conference meets and stuff like that. And I'll tell you, and this was in the Northeast, poor Pitt and West. I think West Virginia was in our conference too, but Pitt was always the furthest one. They had the longest drives, and we always felt bad for them because the cycling teams don't fly anywhere, obviously.
Right.
And I started to think about what it takes for West Virginia to travel. And I teach leadership at a workshop every year for fraternity undergrads. And we've done it at Kansas State, we've done it at Mizzou, we've done it at OU. And so I've been to a ton of the Big 12 campuses. And they are far, far from airports. And that flight from West Virginia is far. And I started to think about what it takes for the West Virginia athletes, again, for the non-revenue sports to get to these Big 12 locations. And it's got to be excruciating and awful. And the thing about West Virginia, though, is you guys are an hour from the Pittsburgh airport, which is a major airport. Like, you're not the problem. The problem is the other Big 12 schools are really far. Again, not football, not men's basketball, because they can charter planes. That's easy. Are really far from major commercial flights that can get you home to West Virginia with, because you probably got kids on red eyes. You mentioned, Bob Huggins basketball. They're on red eyes. They're getting home at 5 a.m, and that's awful. And they got the charter planes, I'm sure. So that's awful. And it's really hard on the student athletes. And so when you think about it and you say, okay, we Big 12 is awesome. West Virginia's great at Big 12. ACC, awesome. It's got some issues, but both are fantastic conferences. The travel is brutal for West Virginia to the Big 12.
Yes. Yeah, the closest school to us right now is Iowa. In the current Big 12 is Iowa State, which is like 900 and some miles, I think, to Ames, Iowa.
And I'm not even talking about fans. I mean, because with due respect to fans, yes, it's wonderful if you can travel to your teams. If not, that's too bad. Right. But because you'll get the home games. But the distance for the student athletes is terrible. Again, because we're not talking about football and basketball. We're talking about golf and tennis, where it's important that those kids be in school.
Exactly. And they don't have the charter planes, like you said.
No. And again, Pittsburgh is easy. You guys aren't the difficulty. It's how do you get from Lubbock back to Pittsburgh having played a Sunday afternoon game?
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it. And then you start to be like, okay, well, that means that you have to do it on Thursday and Saturday. Okay, well, now you're having trouble because there's classes on Thursdays.
Right. So just for an example, just to kind of give the listeners and viewers an idea, student athletes at West Virginia have to drive an hour, basically, to Pittsburgh. Not a big deal. Get on a plane, fly to Lubbock, Texas, or where do they fly to go to Lubbock, Texas? Where's the airport?
You're flying to somewhere and connecting. You're probably connecting in Dallas.
Right.
You're probably flying from Pittsburgh to Dallas and connecting. And you're doing that for everywhere. So in the Pac-12,
and then you're getting there and then you're taking a bus to Lubbock, or
I think you might fly to the little airport in Lubbock.
Right.
Or you're flying somewhere and you're taking a 4-hour bus to Lubbock.
Right.
A 3-hour bus to Lubbock. It's just it's far. And Ames is not that close to Des Moines.
Right.
And Des Moines is not that easy to fly into anyway. Manhattan, Kansas is, and again, I love John Kurtz, and I have some great friends from Kansas State, and love the Wildcats. Jerome Tang is a rock star, but like Manhattan, Kansas is god awful to get to because I've been there. I love it. Aggieville is like so fun to hang out at. But unless you have one of those like military planes that goes right into the fort that's right there, like it is.
Yeah.
Army can get to Kansas State without any trouble. The rest of us, it's a hike.
Yeah. And I appreciate you bringing that because that's something me as a fan who's never, I've never had the privilege of traveling to any of the away games. So I wasn't sure how that worked. And it's probably even different for the fan, right, than it's going to be for a student athlete.
The fans just aren't able to go.
For the most part, you're right.
Yeah. Now, again, the thing about West Virginia is you guys have a lot of fans that are all over the country. Mm-hmm. And so you will have fans where you go. But I would think that, people that are coming, and just so you guys know as well, I've had family in like rural Mannington since like the 1700s. So like I have no doubt they burn couches with the best of them. And so, I look at this and I think, you want to have your fans be able to see your games.
Right.
And it's hard in the Big 12. Again, it's a good problem to have because you're in a phenomenal conference. There's a better conference today than it was last July. I think
it's good to hear.
Mac Rhodes and like Linda Livingstone are phenomenal. The Kirby Hocutt and the president of Texas Tech are phenomenal. Like the really good people, and the new schools that they're bringing in are great. They're just really far. And I'll tell you, in UCF, it's going to be brutal for UCF.
Yes, and BYU potentially.
And BYU. Now the thing of it is for UCF, like it's not worse than it was in it's definitely not worse than it was in the AAC.
Good point.
So
they were traveling a lot there anyway.
Exactly. And so and the money's so much better that like it's worth it.
Yeah.
The thing about West Virginia is with the ACC question is to say like, okay, given that we have a great situation right now, could we have just as good a situation that removes this awful thing for our student athletes?
Right. Yeah. And I think as long as the ACC, if the ACC is able to get a really good lucrative TV deal worked out, or even maybe the one they have now, even though West Virginia would make less in the ACC today than they are in the Big 12, but come 2025, all these TV deals are going to all be new. Who knows what's going to happen? Now the ACC's I think is more long term, but who's to say they can't renegotiate it at some point, right?
Well, let's be honest. I mean, if you're President Gee, and let's say that, and this is where all those people that talk about like, oh, the Pac-12, they're $30 million behind the Big 12, behind the Big 10. They're $30 million. Yeah, they're right, and that's a lot of money. Stanford just got a $1.1 billion check from one donor last month.
Right.
If you're going to say, okay, you know what? $30 million is the difference between our student athletes going to class and our student athletes sitting on planes 4 days a week.
Right. Great point.
Okay.
And let's not forget the travel. West Virginia's travel budget
Huge.
is huge compared to the other schools in the Big 12.
Not only that, you're talking about what's the difference between what are, again, we're not talking football and men's basketball, but for the rest of your sports, the purpose of your existence is for those kids to be in class. Right. And West Virginia University is there to benefit the state of West Virginia and to educate its people. It's not there to play men's tennis. And so, from that regard, if $10 million is the difference between not having those kids sit up all night on a god-awful Southwest plane from Lubbock to Memphis to Richmond to Pittsburgh, that's 10 million, then that's the money.
Right.
And quite honestly, that's what your athletic donors, they know that's what they're there for.